Can new interim DC Charlie Bullen find a solution or two for the New York Giants' embattled run defense? We've got that and a whole lot more on today's Locked On Giants podcast coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, now the number one sports podcast group in America. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, welcome on in to the Blue Crew. Welcome, guys. And to our newcomers and to our everydayers and to everybody in between. Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. All right, Giant fans, we're going to devote this entire episode pretty much to the defensive side of the ball, specifically the run defense, which has been a problem all year long. It goes back to last year, too. So we're going to take a look at some reasons why maybe this run defense isn't performing up to snuff. So we'll look at that starting in segment one with a key piece that I think is factoring into this equation. Then how can new defensive coordinator or interim defensive coordinator Charlie Bullen maybe fix some of these problems? And then finally, we're going to take a look at, do the Giants need to just blow this whole defense up and start all over? I mean, at the beginning of the year, it looked like it was going to be a top 15 defense, a lot of talent, and they just haven't gotten the most out of it. So we'll take a look at why that is, and do they need to start from scratch? So that's what we've got planned for you today on the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, welcome on in to everybody. All right, let's kick things off with something that I was kind of curious about. You know, when I look at the film, when I look at the stats, something's missing from the Giants' run defense. I think we all know that. And I keep going back to the injury to inside linebacker Micah McFadden. Now, interestingly enough, the inside linebacker position was one of the few positions that the Giants did not address in the draft. They didn't really address it that much in free agency either, other than to maybe add, like Chris Ford, who was more of a special teamer, and a couple of guys here and there, but they didn't really address that position. Now, I don't want to say it's all on the inside linebackers, but what I did want to take a look at is what effect has the absence of Micah McFadden had on this run defense. And here's what I found out. Now, I went back and I looked at the 2023 season through 2025 with and without Micah McFadden on the field. Without Micah McFadden, teams have averaged 5.5 yards per rushing attempt, which is a minus 37.20 EPA for all plays. There have been 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble loss, yards before contact 2.04 average, yards after contact 3.50. All right, that's without Micah McFadden. Now, what about with him? Glad you asked. All right, so with Micah McFadden, teams have averaged 4.7 yards per rushing attempt. That's an EPA of 40.6, by the way, for all rushing plays. 10 forced fumbles, 4 fumbles lost, yards before contact 1.62, yards after contact 3.12. So, Micah McFadden, we talk about maybe not as great in coverage, but in the run defense, he's made a difference. And, you just wonder that, having him on the field, the better run, you've seen better run fits, you see more downhill style run defense. He's made a difference, I think. And I think these numbers are very telling because if you stack them up with him and without him on each category, there's a significant difference. So again, average yards per rush, 4.7 on, 5.5 without. Forced fumbles, 10. to 2. Fumbles lost 4-1. Yards before contact 1.62 to 2.04. And yards after contact allowed 3.12 to 3.50. So that's some place that I think I would start when you look at the problems with this run defense. Now, I went in and I also took a look at how the Giants have been playing the run defense, all right, versus, are they just loading 7 in the box or are they doing 8 or more? And here's what I found, this according to SIS. When they have up to 7 in the box, they have averaged, or opponents have averaged 6.9 yards per rushing attempt with a 51% success rate, 9 rushing touchdowns, 68 first downs, 3.79 yards after contact, 3.1 yards before contact. All right. So that's with 7 guys in the box. 8 or more, as you would expect, a lot better. So the average, again, has been with 8 or more, you had 4.2 yards per attempt, a 52% success rate, 8 touchdowns, 27 first downs, 0.96 yards before contact, 3.28 yards after contact. So you would say to yourself, okay, if the run defense is such a problem, why not just put 8 men or more in the box? The problem there is the defensive secondary. You can't leave that group, you can't leave them without help. They just haven't been good, unfortunately, in that defensive secondary. Now, the other thing I wanted to take a look at. All right, now Micah McFadden, he only played in the one game, that being way back in week 1 when he suffered that season-ending injury. To this day, ladies and gentlemen, Micah McFadden is still the 5th best graded run defender on the Giants, according to Pro Football Focus, with a 58.2 grade. And that's amongst the defensive interior linemen, the edge rushers, and the linebackers. So the front 7, still the 5th best. And there's been a lot of guys to come in to play the run. And Micah McFadden is still kind of holding steady there. He's been an injury that I think a lot of people forgot about, but it's been a key injury. Now, in 2024, when Mike McFadden played a little bit more, he was the 2nd best graded Giants run defender amongst the interior linemen, the edge rushers, and the linebackers. He had a 66 run defense grade, right? And that was amongst Giants run defenders who had at least 300 run game snaps. So, yeah, I would say Micah McFadden's absence is a big factor. Now, is it the only factor in why the run defense has struggled? No, it is not. But they're missing him because, again, they haven't really replaced him. If you think about it, they put Darius Muoso out there, and he really didn't get the job done. Then Muoso got injured. Chris Board got injured. They tried him earlier in the year. Zaire Barnes, they've been playing him of late. They just don't have an answer. And it just seems like every year, the one position that the Giants don't address, either in the draft or in free agency, comes back to bite them. And I think inside linebacker takes the cake this year in that category. Now, the other thing worth noting is the Giants added a bunch of talent on that defensive line with the idea of, helping Dexter Lawrence out and maybe doing a better job against the run. Has that talent stepped up and gotten the job done? It has not. Okay, so you look at Roy Robertson Harris, who is supposed to be a run stopper. He's not really paid off in that regard, right? That investment is not paying off. The Giants, the only other decent run stopper they had is now on the Atlanta Falcons roster, and that was Elijah Garcia, which is kind of sad if you think about it. The practice squad guy who's been the only other decent run stopper for them. You look at the current Pro Football Focus grades, Rakeem Nunez-Roches with a 53.9 is the best of the bunch, and that includes over Dexter Lawrence. All of them less than 53.9. So just really not good with the run defense. And again, I mentioned Micah McFadden as a big reason, but there are other reasons that come into play, including scheme, including, the injuries and whatnot. So that being said, in the next segment, I'm going to talk about some ideas that maybe will help him, that maybe we can expect to see with Charlie Bullen as the defensive coordinator. So we'll take a look at all that and more still coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Don't go anywhere.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it, because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up today on the Locked On Giants channel, we've got a special Wednesday edition of the Giants Squad Show. Jay Berman, myself, Mark Collins, former Giants cornerback, going to talk about a whole variety of New York Giants topics. Hope you will check it out. That's going to get underway at 4 p.m. Eastern live. And yes, folks, I do look at the comments while the program is going on. And when I can, I'll answer those comments, your comments and your questions while the show is going on. So I hope you will check that out. Also, coming up on Thursday, we have Crossover Thursday. Nick Cattles of Locked On Patriots and I break down the Monday night matchup, Giants at New England Patriots. Let's hope it's a competitive one. I don't know what to expect, but, there's some things that maybe the Giants can take advantage of. So we will have that for you on Crossover Thursday. And then we'll have a show for you on Friday. And then, of course, we'll start the new week all over again on Monday with all our takeaways and stuff. So hope you will join us. All right, we're talking about the Giants' run defense and how can new interim defensive coordinator Charlie Bullen fix this? Well, short of throwing everybody out and starting from scratch, there's only so much he can do. So I went and I looked at some of the different alignments and formations that the Giants have run and where they have had more success. And the Giants, it's interesting. I got this question from one of my Blue Crew folks, and they said, well, what kind of defense do the Giants run? Is it a 4-3 or a 3-4? And I said, the answer is it's multiple, because you look at the breakdown of the different formations and you do see, they play some 4-3, they play some 2-4-5, so they play different, alignments. So I would think the first and obvious answer to maybe stem the tide of the run is to run more of a 4-3 alignment. All right. When they have done that, according to SIS, they have run 4-3 76 times, which is a 58% usage. And they have had a 46% success rate, which is 15th in the NFL. All right. So not top 10, but a lot better, I would think, that as opposed to being at the bottom of the rankings. All right. Now, when they have run a 3-4-4, they have done that 66% of the time. I think that's one of their most frequently used run defenses, obviously. That would be their base defense. They have had a 46% success rate, 27th in the NFL. All right. So here's the problem, though. If you want to stack up the box to stop the run, you're going to expose the defensive secondary. That's what the problem is. That's probably the next biggest problem besides, the injuries and whatnot. The Giants have run a 7-man box 51% of the time against the run, which is the 18th most in the league. And they have had a 53% success rate, 29th in the league. When they have run a stack box, which is 8 or more defenders up front, obviously the numbers have increased. 66% of the time, they've run a stack box, 8 or more, which is 27th in the league, and they've had a 42% success rate, 14th in the league. All right, so yeah, and when they've gone with a light box, 21% of the time versus the run, which is 14th in the league. So the light fronts, obviously, I think the problem that they're having is they're struggling with power and the stretch runs. They're not getting off their blocks. Guys are being handled solo blocking, and that's creating a problem. And then, you have the leak on the defense's left side, which, for whatever reason, guys, opposing running backs are getting out to that left, what is the offense's right side, the defense's left side, and they're not being funneled back to the middle of the field where maybe the linebackers and the safeties can come down and stop it. So what's the answer? Well, obviously they can run more loaded boxes, but now, again, because of your defensive secondary being banged up and because of the guys that you have to call upon to staff the defensive secondary, it's maybe not the best setup or the best answer to do that all the time. You could maybe bring the safeties down, have the safeties play a little closer, to the line of scrimmage. But yeah, that leaves the cornerbacks exposed. So, you've got Cordell Flott, who's playing well at cornerback. But on the other side, without Paulson Adebo, I don't think you could really do that very often. All right. So, what else can they do against the run? Well, they could try running more stunts and twists to maybe be a little more creative and get the opposing offense off balance and question what they're seeing. So that's certainly an option. They can slide if they need to, slide into different gaps. But these are things that I don't think we've seen a whole lot of. Now, will Charlie Bullen incorporate some of this stuff to stem the tide against the run? Maybe. I don't know, what he's got planned. I do know that the Giants continue to get gouged on the ground. And, we talk about, well, where's the pass rush? The Giants had this great pass rush and it's a strength. Well, you're not going to rush the passer if the opponent's able to get 6+ yards on first down and create second and short and third and short. It's just, you're not going to be able to do much in terms of your pass rush. You've got to be more judicious about it. So, it's a tough situation because the Giants, between the schemes, between, the injuries that they've had, between the players just not getting off blocks and beating solo blocking, it's a combination of everything. So I don't know exactly how much they're going to be able to fix in, these last 5 games or so, but they better do something because it's rinse and repeat every week. And hopefully, like I said, the change in defensive coordinator, maybe Charlie Bullen has some ideas that is going to fix this. Maybe, they're going to get more input from Marquand Manuel and Andre Patterson and the rest of the defensive staff that maybe they weren't getting before. I don't know. But all I know is they better come up with an answer because this is a big thing that is hurting them. All right. Coming up next, we're going to address the question of, do the Giants really need to kind of blow up the defense given the lack of production they've had this year on the unit? Or do they have a solid enough core to build on? We'll take a look at that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. FanDuel offers a host of different ways to bet, not just on the NBA, but on the NFL, the NHL, and so much more. Whenever you have a hunch, they make it easy, safe, and secure to get in on all the action, letting you bet the way you want to go. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head on over to FanDuel.com today to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in this segment, I've started looking at the Giants roster. The Giants, as you know, they're not going to the postseason. So I'm starting to kind of transition a little bit to postseason activities, what went wrong, personnel reviews, and all that stuff. And one of the big things I want to tackle is, do the Giants need to blow up the defense? Now, coming in to this year, I think everybody, or most everybody, myself included, thought that the Giants would have a top 15 defense in terms of the talent. Now, injuries have not helped. Let's be realistic about that. But the Giants also have not gotten their money's worth out of the guys that they have brought in. All right. Now, I mentioned the defensive front, the defensive linemen, the Roy Robertson Harris's, for example, hasn't really been the run stopper that I think they were looking for. They were hoping to get a guy to pair up with Dexter Lawrence to maybe take some of the double teams that Dexter routinely faces and free him up to, handle solo blocking and make some plays. That has not happened. Darius Alexander, their third-round draft pick, who they drafted this year, he got off to a slow start. Looks promising now, but he's kind of coming on late in the year when it's kind of too late for this year. But I think they have something there. But the rest of the guys, I mentioned Elijah Garcia. He's actually been, before he was poached off of the practice squad, he was actually one of the better players that the Giants had on that defensive front. So I just feel like, just based on how everything has happened, and you can't even blame injuries so much here, but I feel like all the money that was spent on the defensive line hasn't paid off. And I'll throw in Chauncey Golston in that mix. Chauncey Golston has dealt with injuries all year long. So that's been a problem. I mentioned the linebackers, not having depth there. Again, that's because of the injuries. But, I still say that Bobby Okereke is a lot better than what we've seen from him. And I've said all along that I did not think that he was a fit for what Shane Bowen ran. So, will a new defensive coordinator coming in here fix that? Let's hope so, if Bobby is back here. But the other issues, I think, overall, just not having guys set. Like, I'll look at Abdul Carter. Now, Abdul Carter, even though he's had pressures and whatnot, the rest of his game hasn't been quite what I think we all thought it would be. I know a lot of us were saying, oh, look, he's a favorite to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Well, he hasn't looked anywhere close to being Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I think part of that is because he hasn't really settled into one particular position. They've asked him to do a lot, some of which is a fit for what he does well, some of which is not a fit. And I think some of the stuff that they ask him to do that's not a fit, I suspect he gets frustrated because, he tries and he gets frustrated. And when you get frustrated, sometimes that shows up on your game tape. So they've got to figure out, whoever the new defensive coordinator long-term is going to be, figure out a way to settle him into a role and keep him in his role and let him do what he does best. And I just feel like, up until this point, it was a case of fitting square pegs into round holes as opposed to adapting the system to what guys did best. And that's a problem when a coach does that. So you can point to that as a reason for the Giants struggling. Okay. As far as, core guys that they have, Burns and Thibodeau and Carter, that's a solid core there at outside linebacker. But again, you got to figure out a way to get all three of them doing something that is a strength and not just sacrificing Carter because he's the rookie, So that's been an issue. The defensive secondary, my gosh, I don't know what happened to Tyler Newman. He looked so promising as a rookie, and then he had that season-ending ankle injury a year ago, and he's just not looked the same since. He's just not having a good year. And I just don't understand why. I mean, it's the same system, so I'm not sure why he has regressed, but he's got to play a lot better than what he's been playing. Javon Holland hasn't been horrible, but has he been worth the money that he was signed to? I don't think we could say that just yet. One interception so far, and I won't go so far as to say he's been worth it. Paulson Adebo, okay, injuries aren't his fault, but still, that was an investment they made as well, and they just haven't had a return on that. But I think he could be part of the answer going forward. So you look at, the state of the defense, and there should be little question about which direction they go in as far as, the offseason. They've got to do more on the defense. They've got to add more help at linebacker. They desperately got to get another cornerback in here. All right. Deonte Banks has shown he's not the answer. And I don't know at this point if Deonte Banks, even if they bring in a new defensive coordinator next year, if he's going to continue to have the opportunities that he's had. So I wouldn't say blow up the entire defense, but is there any bigger disappointment on this team than to see all the talent that we all thought that they had? And once again, they are at or near the bottom in every major statistical category on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, that to me, more so than the record, is probably the biggest disappointment. So how they approach it moving forward, I don't know. I mean, they're going to need a lot of help. Cornerback is going to be a high priority. I could tell you that right now. Do they bring back Cordell Flott? I don't know. If they don't, now they're going to maybe need 2 cornerbacks at least to fill out the depth. So just so much work still to be done. And we'll see how it shapes up. I mean, we've got another, 5 games to go to get through before we get to the off season and we see what the plan is. But they better have a good plan because this just cannot continue. All right, Giant fans, as always, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL with Tyler the Madman Rowland, who gives you a double dose of espresso to start your football day, and then Tony Wiggins, who takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. You can find Locked On NFL wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. All right, Giant fans, I will see you tomorrow with Nick Cattles of Locked On Patriots. And also, don't forget, 4 o'clock today, Wednesday, the Giants Squad Show special time. It'll be Mark Collins, former Giants cornerback, Jay Berman, and yours truly. We're going to recap a busy week for the Giants and take a look at what's still to come. So we hope you will join us. All right, until then, have a good one, everybody.